morning, good afternoon, and good night, wherever you're tuning in. We are Slava and Jonathan, bringing you the Side Quest podcast, where we talk about character development, stories, and all things that are world building. And we occasionally take side quests, because, frankly, that's how conversations work. Just as a reminder, this whole show is spoiler heavy. So sit back, tune in, and join us on this episode of Side Quest.
Good morning, Jonathan.
Good morning.
Casey and JT, you're back with us. Welcome back.
Good to be here. Good to be here.
Thank you.
We are continuing our trek through Cradle with Uncrowned Part 3.
Walking the sacred arts path together once again.
We're missing two of our sacred artists this week, but the core is here.
That's true.
The core four.
There were some, what'd you say in the chat? There were some HR things we can't talk about?
Right. There was an issue with Matt. Matt wasn't able to join us today, but he's on a PIP.
Yeah. For those who don't work in corporate America, a PIP is a performance improvement plan.
Oh, boy.
It's what they give you before they fire you. I've never heard of someone going on a PIP that ended up keeping their job, honestly.
No, it's just a manipulative way to stack the deck against an employee.
Yeah.
Because if it's truly an employee who's performing poorly, you just fire him or her. A PIP is usually a manipulative trick that HR or your boss tells HR to pull.
Yeah.
Eke out the last possible, improvement on this employee.
Yeah. And
or lack thereof.
Right. The chess move there is, well, I don't like this guy. We don't have a legal reason to fire him or her. So let's get this person on some technicality, write up the performance improvement plan. It's, stacked against them. And then, well, you're not fixing yourself or fixing the issue as fast as we'd like it. We're sorry, we'll have to let you go.
It's a casus belli.
Yeah. Anyway, Jonathan, you want to give us a real quick recap of the plot for the audience, and we'll get into it.
Yes. All right. Back with Uncrowned, we have our two main characters that we're following, Lindon and Yerin, who are invited to join the Uncrowned King Tournament because they've hit Underlord in the last book. And the Uncrowned King Tournament, Yerin's mentor, only made it to the top 8 and never surpassed that. And so she's not scared per se, but she knows how impressive it is because she knew how impressive he was, and that anchors us in the story to know that the characters are juxtaposed with this guy who died, who was really strong, couldn't even make it past top 8. So we have that as a marker to know how difficult this is. And some of the teams, because at the end of the last book, Lindon was taken, and now he's a part of the Akura team, and Yerin is on a team with Ethan and someone else that no one cares about because it's just true. And so they're on separate teams and they have to fight each other, which will add some interesting tension in this book if you haven't read it yet. They end up being late. Yerin and Ethan end up being late to the tournament, skimming in by the skin of their teeth because they were sabotaged. And Lindon has been fighting for his life figuratively and literally with the Akura clan, who all hate him because he's not part of the family and they want to prove themselves before their mother, Malice. So that's kind of the setup for the plot. We get to again begin the arc of the tournament. So we see a lot of it, but we don't finish the tournament per a lot of Will Wight's writings, where he just keeps you in the action. And so books end on a cliffhanger, if you will, where the tournament's not complete, but then you move on to the next book, per se, which I think, JT, correct me on this, but feels very in line with Cultivation novels, where you're kind of just always in the action, and you're always, because you're growing, there's no stopping points. It's just the next thing starts, even if the previous thing isn't finished. Is that fair?
Sort of. The ones that I've read, generally speaking, are basically just one long book. Because it's published on a web platform. I think they are separated into major storylines, what they call arcs, the same way that you might find a Dragon Ball Z is separated by arcs and say, oh, this is the battle against this guy, and then once you win, you have your little conclusion, it calms down, and then the next enemy appears a little bit later, and that begins the next arc.
Like, you've got a little bit of downtime in between each one. The thing with this one, though, is that Will Wight has imposed a time restriction on Lindon with the Dread God awakening. So he can't do the whole cultivation thing of, sit in a cave for 100 years to advance to the next level of cultivation.
Right.
He's got a time limit.
And that's an interesting thing that I found that Will Wight didn't talk about, but definitely uses. Did he ever say that furthering your cultivation, getting further into closer to Monarch, makes your lifespan longer?
There's like one sentence that I can think of that I don't remember the exact sentence, but it's like something along those lines that does extend your life. Pretty sure.
It's a heavy part of the Chinese cultivation novels is, oh, I'm getting really close to the edge of my lifespan. I'm 500 years old now. And then I go, oh, but I found this item, which is going to get me to the next level. Suddenly, boom, lifespan, 2,000 years. But each step is harder along the way. So you're taking more time to get through it, unless you're taking as many shortcuts as possible.
Which everyone recommends, right? Because that always works out.
Depending on the shortcut.
I mean, we just heard in this one, wasn't there that guy who was talking about, how many young cultivators to Lindon when he was being tested by the Akura clan, many young cultivators ruin their lifeline by taking too many pills.
True.
And then Lindon breaks his device or whatever with his lifeline.
Oh, Lindon, if you only knew.
So we got to see all the monarchs arranged against each other in this book. Finally, we got all of them set up in the one arena, solely off of the impression from this book, because I know several of you guys have read through all of it. Jeremy, already, which one is your favorite and which is your least favorite of the monarchs?
The Monarchs?
Easy. Reagan Shen. I'm not joking.
I know.
Why?
So Reagan Shen is the Emperor of Lions.
Yep.
He seems like a bit of a rude guy, arrogant. Like it says Emperor of Lions. That is basically pride to a T. But he's the most interesting character of them. That's why he's my favorite. Emrys Silentborn doesn't talk much. Tiberian Aurelius is dead. Akura Malice is a jerk. Seth Kunaz is a bit annoying, and his name is weird.
Whoa, cultural appropriation much?
Yeah,
His
You're
culture is made up,
anti-dragon?
it doesn't count.
anti-Cthulhu
Okay.
because of those eldritch names.
Uh-huh.
Shamiara is a cheater,
Yep.
Agreed.
and the 8-Man Empire is 8 people. And North Strider is boring.
North Strider's not
Strider's a-
boring. North Strider's sweet.
a dick.
His personality is boring. That's my
Why?
opinion. Reagan Shen is a character. There's a lot to him. He's not a likable guy, but he is
Fair.
interesting.
So
It's funny because I was going to talk about him as well.
Really?
He is the magnificent bastard.
leave it to the brothers.
He is the magnificent bastard archetype. He's the kind of evil guy who comes up to you, hands you a card. The card says, "Hi, I'm your new evil overlord." And he just looks at you with a smug look on his face and a wine glass in his hand.
He does like his wine. Honestly, every time Raygun Shen hits the screen of the book, I just think of Ajani from Magic the Gathering. And I'm just like, huh, okay. Some of your cards suck, but that's fine.
But hey, at least he's not completed.
Sure.
I can't think of anybody that I dislike as this guy I like and this guy I hate, but I do find North Strider interesting, fascinating maybe even. I want to know more about him because when he was in Ghostwater, he
Right.
came in, he did his thing, he led Ghostwater to collapse, he killed that guy. I forget his name already.
Harmony?
I think it was, Harmony.
Yeah.
You would know better. Yeah, whoever he killed when the Ghostwater collapsed. And then he comes into play here. Hi, I'm North Strider. Here's my card. I'm now in charge. I'm the captain now. of this tournament. And so that stood out to me as, so who is this guy? Because he was doing this one thing in Ghostwater.
And he made Ghostwater. That's his creation.
Right, that too. He created Ghostwater, he let it collapse, and he came in here and just took over the whole tournament. And this tournament is a pivotal moment for this world. They're doing this because of the stuff that's going around in the background and even in the world as a whole. Everybody's waiting for these dread gods to come. So this tournament is part of this storyline with the dread gods, and he comes in and takes it over. I find him the most interesting.
Was it about the dread gods? I thought it was more about posturing with the monarchs and attacking each other.
Well, the dread gods are looming, and that's why at the end of the book we also have like an Abaddon who's like, hey, I'm going to make this even spicier, where penance is, offered up. But because the monarchs, and this is something that I believe that we covered in this book, or like the book reveals, not covered, that the monarchs can't defeat the dread gods themselves, so they need more help. They need stronger people. They find stronger people through the tournament. That's the only way to do it, apparently.
I would say Northstrider as a character, to me, he's not super interesting, but he's definitely an antagonistic force. He asserts himself, like Slava said, at the beginning of the tournament by basically saying, okay, I'm running this now. And Chamiara is like, okay, all right, I'll allow it. But
Was it her or was it the announcer?
she is the announcer, I thought.
No, I don't think so.
I thought like the voice was generated from her power.
Go ahead. I'll look it up.
Might be. You look it up.
He's basically tipping things to make things more interesting for him, I would say, throughout the tournament, like setting up the different people to fight against each other. In particular, he sets up Yerin to fight against Mercy, and then we're all left going, oh, of course, he wants to pit the two friends against each other. And then he rug pulls, and it's Lindon versus Yerin.
Yeah, that was a fun moment. Did you get caught off guard by that?
I got caught off guard.
Me too. It was a great moment. Honestly, one of my favorite Will Wight plot twists, if not the top one, because he leads you to believe that we can trust the narrator, basically. We can trust Nordstrider. And then it's like, actually, you can't.
He's not the narrator. He's the what's the word? Not the announcer, the officiator.
Yeah. Yep.
That puts everything else that he's done into question now. If he's willing to rug pull by having two people fight who he said would fight different people, what else is he willing to do? And we see that at the end where he basically ambushes Lindon. And it's like Bully in high school, like grabbing some nerds, like, give me your lunch money.
Yeah. Nordstrider is chaotic neutral because we see this at the end of Ghostwater where he lets Harmony die. He's like, no. And he stops Charity from getting in. He's like, no, he needs to live with the consequences to his actions. He commits to doing things his way on his timeline because he wants to. I don't think he's chaotic evil. I don't think we see enough evil in him to justify that, but certainly chaotic neutral to talk in D&D terms.
Right.
Which is why I like him, because I often play chaotic neutral characters. But
oh, you would.
I do. It's just because it lets me do whatever I want. Although, if I were to grow, being a cultivation novel, if I were to grow into myself a little more, I would be better to play something that has more stricter rules, like a paladin or something like that. Or a Death Knight, which would be really fun. Anyway, that's off track. I like Nordstrider, so I'm with Slava. So we're 2-2, Rhaegon Shen and Nordstrider, because we've seen Nordstrider like he's an inventor, he's a bit of a visionary, he's also a loner and a wanderer. I don't think we've covered that he like basically climbed his way to the top by defeating dragons himself and then devouring their Madra. But like that's part of his backstory as well. So yeah, big fan of Nordstrider.
I did, just to circle back, I did look it up. It says the Nine-Cloud Soul is the one who's talking, which I think is supposed to be a construct of some kind.
Okay, because I thought Nine-Cloud Soul was their foundational path, the path of the Nine-Cloud Soul.
I forget what it's called, but she's not the one talking because she's a
contestant.
She's unable to talk. Yeah, she's a contestant.
Monarchs slumming it with the Underlords.
JT, the first time that you read this, were you caught off guard as well about Lindon and Yerin fighting each other?
Oh, yeah. And in fact, I wanted to talk about that battle specifically because it's my favorite scene in the book.
Really?
Probably my favorite scene of the entirety of the series. I think it has the most emotional charging.
Seriously?
I'd agree.
Yeah,
Okay.
no,
All right.
definitely.
Lay it on me.
But it's also the thing I hate the most because it is Will White's biggest fumble, his biggest bag drop, in that he does this amazing scene pitting them against each other. So yeah, the emotions charged here. You can tell when he finishes that he expected to win the whole time. He had done all this growth. It's this comparison scene where, I'm so much stronger than I used to be. And he wants to win badly and thinks he can. And when he loses, it is devastating, not just to us, the readers, but to him within the story, because he's going, well, I was playing it cool in the beginning because I was sure I could win, and I was giving it to you. Now I feel more of an idiot because I was going to lose anyways. And now there's kind of this will they, won't they relationship going on. So he's feeling a little bit emotionally attached to the scene. And he sets it up perfectly, and then Northstrider comes in at the very end to, what was it? What's the Machiel the Hound's?
Yep. The Abaddon.
The Abaddon representative comes in with penance, changes the game, and Northstrider comes in and blocks Lindon and then cuts off the end of the book. And I go, well, where's my satisfaction here? You had all this emotion, and now I'm going to have to wait for the next book to see it play out. And on top of that, because of the changes that happened, they essentially put it aside and say, oh, okay, we can't do that now. We've got so much more to worry about right now. We can't have a satisfying emotional conclusion to this.
Okay.
That's what I can't stand, is that he had it. He had this beautiful moment, and then he wasted it.
Rug pulls it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
What do you think about that?
I can see the ending too quickly, but I think that's, I guess to play devil's advocate, because I don't have a better way to ease into this. I think that's just his writing style, is he doesn't sit on the emotional moments. I actually think that he has done a better job sitting on emotional moments in his newest series, The Last Horizon. And I don't mean this to be rude to him, but I don't know how to say it otherwise. I think he just didn't know how to do it before. You know how like writers evolve, right? Like all elements of writing good foreshadowing, writing good moment. To linger on those takes time. Or maybe he just doesn't want to do it. Like that's another option. Like he's just like, I'm not going to do that. I want to keep the story going, which is also fair. But we don't get those moments. I actually think that the most charged emotional moment is Lindon and Ethan after Lindon loses his arm, because he forces Ethan to confront the fact that he can't do whatever he wants, and literally it costs someone else something because of Ethan's hubris.
Honestly, I finally managed to pin down for myself why Ethan's attitude bugs me so much during this book.
You like being a janitor, and you're confronted by his ability to clean better than you.
Listen, I don't clean dirt. I clean people.
Okay.
Anyway, he comes off as like the all-knowing like schemer, Loki trickster sort of thing.
Uh-huh.
But he's just a really good gambler who knows what the dice are going to roll most of the time, because he's got, his path basically helping him along as a handicap. And then when the dice...
A handicap? Woo!
Well...
How do you really feel?
The handicap to his attitude of, like, I know how this is all going to turn out. And then when the dice roll hits, like, say he knows 999 times out of 1,000 what the dice roll is, then it hits the one time that he doesn't know. And the issue is he's not gambling money. He's gambling lives and futures. And so when it hits that lose, you end up with things like, oh, Lyndon's arm getting chopped off. Or... oh, yeah, and now our cloud chip is busted because I didn't see a dragon coming.
I can buy that. I wouldn't call him a know-it-all, but I think, Casey, you hit the nail on the head that he is a good gambler. He's a good strategist, and he's been around long enough to know when to hold him and when to fold him, to keep that analogy going. For most emotional battle or most emotional moment in this book, I agree with JT. It's the battle between Yerin and Lindon. Moments before, the moments during, the eventual loss of Lindon, that whole thing, I was more captivated by than any other battle. The rest of the battles were fun. I enjoyed reading them, but this one was the one that stood out to me because they're members of the same clan. They're companions. If I'm correct, there's this romantic undertone, whether it's ever explored further, there's going to be just a little bit of tension between them. That's going on in the last 2 books. More importantly, to the previous point, they're companions and they're friends, and they have this affection for each other, which right now is just brotherly, sisterly affection. And now they're forced to fight against each other. Lindon, he goes more through an emotional arc here, but put all together, to me, that fight stood out above the rest of them.
Definitely the best moment of this book. It's surprising to me, JT, that that's like your favorite moment in the series.
I don't know about favorite moment.
Oh, did I mishear you? You didn't say
The
that?
most emotionally charged moment.
It's the moment that made me.
Oh, well, I still disagree with it,
The
but
moment made me like rage because I felt the anger when Northstrider pulled that stunt, and then felt the disappointment when Lindon lost. That connected with me really well. The whole like the arm getting cut off, I don't connect with this much. I haven't had that kind of extreme accident.
you do have both your arms. Can confirm for anyone on the audio only, because that's all we offer. JT, in fact, does have both arms.
I actually have a third one. You can't see it though.
It's not the type of podcast.
That's the wrong arm.
PG.
All right.
Whoa, I didn't mean it that way.
Let's pull back now, y'all.
Take it back. No, but it's okay.
So-
I've lost the thought. So
That's all right. Let me pull it back. This moment is more emotionally charged for you. It sounds like it's more relatable. Why is this moment relatable? Have you had a moment where friends become
rivals.
enemies become lovers, type of thing? Is that you've had this before?
No.
You've been in a tournament where you had to fight a really close friend of yours?
This is just my personality. I like coming out on top. It's the competitive nature of it, but also I don't want to necessarily fight somebody that I'm not ready to fight, make myself look like a fool. I've had this kind of prideful streak before.
Oh, okay.
I'd still probably do. I remember. Shut up, Casey. When Guitar Hero first came out, I had some friends or some family members that had played it, and they got it for Christmas. And I was watching them, but I refused to play it because I wasn't sure that I would do it well enough. And everybody else is watching you. There's like a whole family in the room. And that I essentially said, I'm not going to do it until I go home and do it myself for a little bit, practice, and then I can reveal my ability.
Okay.
And that's the kind of personality I had when I was a kid. I still have a little bit of that today. So I feel that in this going, he
Right.
was so confident going into it. You can see he's got a bit. I mean, what was it? It was during the scene with him and Mercy at the theater where she's talking to him about Yerin. So there's more of that reveal of, oh, there's a possibility of a relationship here. Nobody wants to look weak in front of the girl they like.
Or get lambasted by an audience full at tournament. The words are hard right now. By the girl that you like.
Right. He's trying to do the gentlemanly thing, at least in his head at the beginning, which is bow out. But it's also the safe option because he can say, well, I wasn't actually trying. I was giving it to you.
Oh, yeah.
And she hated that.
Yeah, she did. And she got through to him with Dross, which was a great scene.
Right. And I think that's kind of Lindon. I've mentioned this in previous episodes where Lindon is the scrappy little dude, and he's an underlord now, so he's not that scrappy, but he's always been the scrappy little guy. He had no soul. He always had to do...
Well, did you take his picture? You took his soul?
I did. He always had to do... How do I say this?
Slowly.
He is constantly trying to survive. Up until Underlord, he has to fight for everything he gets. And because he's a few steps behind everybody all the time, he's always looking for the easy way out. Not necessarily because he's a coward, but because he doesn't want to die. In this world, it's a dog-eat-dog world, and he's constantly trying to gain an edge. So he's at least on the same level as the people he's competing with. And I think that plays into him here a little bit to continue JT's point. Yes, he's trying to be a gentleman. Yes, there's these feelings that he might have for Yerin. But ultimately, this is where I think he gets pushed a little bit to the right, meaning in the right direction, where he has to fight Yerin because it's part of the thing, it's part of the rules. He has to do it. But also, if he tries to be quote-unquote the gentleman and pull back a little bit, he will lose the respect that Yerin has for him. He will lose some of that companionship that he shares with her, because this would be a slight to her. She would feel offended by this. So here, I think it's a minor, but still a lesson learned.
Yeah.
I like this topic. I want to shift to this thing that JT said about so far in the series, this is the most emotionally charged. Do you guys agree with that? Like this point that he brought up initially? Or are you like me where there's another one that stood out to you that you feel is more emotionally charged or feels more emotionally satisfying, et cetera, et cetera?
Emotionally charged, it's either this one or Orthos leaving.
Oh, yeah.
Because Orthos is sort of a better mentor figure than Ethan, because Ethan just says like, "Oh, hey, I'm hawking him off to a turtle. Here."
So you like Lindon being bullied.
What?
Orthos bullies him the whole time.
Oh yeah. He sort of needs
That's your preferred mentorship type? Casey's like, okay, train me.
he sort of needs someone to push him because
Bully me, JT, bully me.
I'm used to that
Too close to
relationship.
home? Okay, sorry.
Shut up. But in a way, Lindon did sort of need him at his back, basically pushing him, letting him know, you are strong. Shut up. Stop, being a coward. Stop cowering in the dark. Take a stand. Because he really was sort of cowardly and obsequious and all of that stuff
Mm-hmm.
until Orthos, got through to him in a major way. And Orthos leaving was sort of like an emotional moment. It was not just for him, but for the other characters who'd gotten used to Orthos, who enjoyed his company.
Yeah.
You said emotionally charged or emotionally
Satisfying.
satisfying. The duel was not emotionally satisfying, particularly because of what Jeremy said at the end. What happened at the end of it. Oh yeah, we're not resolving this.
Yeah.
I like the moment where Lindon calls out Ethan in regards to his arm and makes Ethan kind of take account of his brash actions and him not really thinking, gambling with people's lives and limbs, to be quite blunt. That was a good moment. I liked it. I like this moment too. As I said just a few moments ago, I don't know if I would pit them against each other. I don't know if I even can say, oh, this is definitely more emotionally charged or less emotionally charged. But this is one of the few moments where, as I'm reading it, I kind of pulled back and go, oh, wow, this is a really fascinating part of the story. I like what Will's doing here. Even though it may be short and he just sits on it for a moment, those two will stand out in the whole series. Now, there might be more in books 8 through 12, but so far, those two stand out as emotionally packed moments for me. But I wouldn't be able to, put a hierarchy on them.
I would like to shift the conversation forward. We've talked about like this for 30 minutes now.
Well, before we go, I've got one more thing, which is not necessarily related. It's more about Will Wight's writing style. He throws in these sort of really emotional scenes, especially with the post-fight scene with him and Ethan. I think going, are you ready to talk to Yerin now? He knows that's what he's supposed to do. It's what he should do. It's what he feels is the right thing to do. But no, he's not ready emotionally. And everything changing suddenly actually has a positive effect on his situation where now, oh, there's something more important going on now. I have to stop worrying about myself. Kind of saves him from having the awkward situation of talking with Yerin. But Will Wight, I think one of his weaknesses here is his inability to consistently bring up these emotional connections from earlier in the story back forward.
Okay.
They have the scene with the arm, and then how often do you see them bring it back up? Oh yeah, Ethan, didn't you just your last plan got my arm cut off?
Right.
They seem to they focus on it and then they move on. Whereas Path of Kings, which I just read, Way of Kings.
We have Kings.
My favorite character in that is Kaladin, and Kaladin
We're all very surprised.
has this it's slave mentality is what he has in that book.
Yeah.
He does most of the book as this slave, and he constantly has this inner battle of my experiences from before have affected how I can think about the world and everybody else now, and dealing with that is a huge portion of, I think, the Stormlight archives.
It is. That's a fair point, though. Of I would label it as the characters don't remember their own past.
I can agree with that.
The book is focused on the now.
Yeah, which is a fun point to bring up because I didn't think of it that way before, and I don't know if it's an authorship maturity based on whenever this was written, or a decisive choice, like, oh, well, I don't want to do that. It's not the point of the book, which is totally possible. I'm not sure. What do you think, Slava?
I think it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. Maybe it's author maturity. Anybody in any profession grows in that profession, and Will Wight, 10 books from now, Will Wight will be a more refined author than he was when he wrote
Facts.
Uncrowned.
Facts. Yes, chef.
But also, this is the genre that moves fast.
Right.
And Will Wight probably
Also facts.
made a conscious decision not to sit in some of these moments, not to give Lindon or Yerin or any of the other characters a lot of internal struggles with the past. We only see blimps of it with Lindon. We see a little bit more with Yerin because of the Blood Shadow, and she often references her experiences with the Sage Master or the Sword Master, Sword Sage. So we get them, but they're not expanded upon like they are in Way of Kings. So yes, that's not really maybe a satisfactory answer because I haven't thought about it. I'm thinking about this on the fly as I'm hearing JT.
It's a good point.
It's a very good
same.
point.
Yeah.
It's a very good point, but I'm hearing it from JT for the first time, so I'm processing it. It might be author maturity, but I think more is his decision to do this. And that might be connected. His immaturity, quote unquote, as an author
Sure. Okay.
might be driving his decision not to add this.
What do you think, Casey?
I would say one of the big issues with this, not the series, but with him trying to write out essentially an anime in a book format, is that you miss a lot of details, like, say, how the characters are looking at each other, or he might have to skip things that would be dedicated to episodes in anime of them coming to grips with, say, Ethan not being the best mentor, or
Charging a spirit bomb for 37 episodes.
Shut up, Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball is like the example of why the anime typically is not one-to-one time-wise with how it's actually depicted.
So, to bring up a point to bolster Slava's point, I think a lot of it is author maturity and being able to consider and think about how these characters are thinking in a more realistic human way. But it does sort of follow from Lindon's personality and Cultivation as a whole. And you see it earlier in the book. I'm looking at page 108 on my book, where he's talking, it was chapter 7, where he's talking with Mercy at the theater. That scene where he starts cycling during a break in the show. And she's like, "Don't you have any hobbies?" "My hobby is training." So you see that he is the kind of person that constantly is working to improve himself and stops for nothing.
While you were watching shows, I was training in the way of the sword.
He's the David Goggins of Cradle.
He's on that Sigma grind set.
Oh.
Lyndon's next venture, starting a drop shipping company.
Oh.
So-
Instead of calling it Amazon, though, it's called Sacred Valley. Sacred Valley
you go.
shipping.
All right.
Not as funny. All right, it's fine. I'm gonna go back to the closet. It's okay.
Is there more to say on that point? Anybody else got anything?
Lindon can't answer what hobbies he has. He's like, I guess soulsmithing is my hobby. And you're like, well,
Right.
okay, but do you do anything else? No.
Yeah.
No.
Read any books? Enjoy basketball?
How about that local sports team?
Do they have sports teams? In
Yeah,
this?
and then she winks, goes, and what about you and Aaron? What are you? Wink, wink. And he's like, and I'm putting words in his mouth. I'm paraphrasing. I guess we're friends. She makes me want to work harder. When I'm not with her, I feel like something's wrong. But I like advancing with her together. So I like soulsmithing with her and, doing stuff. And you're like, okay.
Do you think Mercy is scoping him out to see if she has an opening, or is she just asking friendly?
Oh, I don't know. This is something that was one of my hot takes. I think we played around with it a few episodes ago where there might be something that Mercy feels for Lindon. But seriously, in world, what I think, if she does, I don't think it's a possibility because of her position in the world.
Right.
Casey, what do you think?
Let's get controversial. I like Mercy as a character better. But Yerin's better for relationship drama. That's why Will Wight's going to go with Yerin no matter what.
I think Yerin is a better character, but I personally like Mercy more.
Yes. That's why, exactly. Yerin's good written. She's great for relationship drama. But Mercy is just a really cool girl.
Do you really think Yeren's gonna create like relationship drama?
No.
We just saw a fight that was basically all relationship drama. Come on.
No, that's not relationship drama in the sense of like boy meets world relationship drama, the stuff we see.
That's relationship drama as it applies to cultivation novels. Like,
Okay.
now I must fight my betrothed.
I'll concede to that point. I will concede to that point.
We'll end on this if we're picking girlfriends from anime.
Okay.
Be very cautious about what you say next.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird animes out there.
Millions upon the internet will disagree
We're
with
talking
you.
about one anime in book form.
Okay.
Between Yerin and Mercy, I find Mercy more attractive as a character. No. Nope. Damn it.
Wins again.
Oh.
Damn you, subconscious.
So we're all agreed. Mercy's the best.
Well, I never said that. I didn't voice an opinion yet, but don't put words in my mouth, JT.
I was going to say, before my subconscious took over, that I find Yerin more attractive as a character. And if we're picking anime girlfriends here,
Freudian slip.
yeah, I think Yerin would be the better girlfriend.
For you, Mercy would be better. No. For you,
Mercy?
Yes.
Why?
Because you and Yerin would just be buddies.
I'm not Lindon.
Mercy would make you grow because you are Yerin.
Jonathan,
That's true.
have you met Slava's wife?
Yes.
How can you say what you just said with a straight face then?
She's not bubbly.
No. I'm making new choices as the author of Slava's life.
Goodness.
And it's going to get wild, folks.
This is a retcon.
What nightmare have I
Jonathan,
woken up
I'm
to?
your editor. I'm cutting that.
We're retconning
Nope.
your marriage life. Okay, wait, Jonathan, what's your decision then?
I think that Lindon would do better with...
No, not Lindon. No, Jonathan.
Well, I would pick Charity because I think someone needs to put her in her place.
No, it's between
There's
Yerin.
always a third.
So you've taken upon yourself to be the alpha and put Charity in her place.
Right. I don't want to deal with Malice because she'll never be put in her place. That's too much. But Charity would listen.
So you have essentially
There's a third option.
You've dodged the red versus blue argument from Neon Genesis Evangelion by going with the third option of Masato.
There's always a third option.
Well played, Casey.
There's always a third option.
How about we talk about something different now that
All right. Did you have a point
Yeah.
to bring up?
Yeah. Who would you call the arc villain in this? I would call it Azathoth or whatever her name is, the Gold Dragon, because that's the foe that they've been building up to defeat in the tournament.
Sophoranatoth. Or Sephara.
Sephara. Yeah.
Sephora.
Sophoranatoth.
Sephora. Yes.
Sephora,
The
makeup company.
makeup brand.
The makeup company is the big bad guy in the Uncrowned King tournament.
Sophara, you look good in gold. Anyway,
Oh, man.
we don't immediately beat her in this book. She's
Right.
stuck into the next book, and because Lindon's lost, it's now down to Yerin who's going to have to fight her, or at least that's how it looks like from my perspective. I haven't read all of the books yet.
Right. I briefly touched on this with Slava in one of the last episodes where there's layers to who the big bad evil guy is. On the cosmic level, the Abaddon are fighting against the Mad King. So that's a big bad guy, but it's like a separate plot that gets sprinkled in here and there, because in book 1 we got a vision from an Abaddon, et cetera, right? So it's been there from the beginning, but it doesn't get talked about a lot. Then you have big bad evil guy number 2, which is the Dread Gods, which, it's not a single one. Again, it's multi. That is a looming threat. Then you have big bad guy evil persons number 3, which is kind of the Monarchs, specifically Malice. They each have different wants and whatever, but they are at least at some juncture aligned. Then you have big bad evil guy number 4, which is like the Akura clan itself for the main characters. And then you have number 5, which would be like Sephora, as we're going to call her. So there's layers to it. It's not a great answer, but good storytelling should have layers, I think.
Right. It sort of follows how anime deals with, having villains where, oh yeah, you've got this one, but they work under this one, which they work under this one.
Yeah, it's like the Mafia.
In our case, though, what we've been doing is we jumped from the Black Flame Empire and all the fights up to there with, him getting through iron, gold, everything like that. And then we've went off in a different direction and started Ghostwater, which I feel kicked off this essentially season, you might say. You have the first season, which is up to that point, and the second season now, which we're in, sort of is the conflict between the Monarch factions. And Sophranitos is the current antagonist.
His scope of possible enemies continues to expand as the explored universe from Lindon's perspective also expands. He starts in Sacred Valley, where he's got the families and the greater sects outside of them who are the possible antagonists. Then he leaves Sacred Valley and gets outside, so you've got some people outside. Then he joins the Black Flame Empire, and he's got the whole empire there. And then in the next book, they reveal, all of this is actually owned by the Akura clan. And so that expands even larger. And this book shows you a little bit, finally, of the whole world and a little bit of the outside universe to Lindon, with the inclusion of the Abaddon messing things up. It's that continual raising the stakes as they go along, which is very classic Cultivation novel. Also, classic Cultivation novel is not setting things up particularly well. Often these authors will decide they need a new villain of some kind or an organization, and they won't bother trying to create something with what they have. They'll just say, and there was also this sect that was it was in the corner of this one continent that we just hadn't talked about, and the character hasn't gone to yet. So we'll pull some people from there.
Just sprinkle some evil young masters in here. It'll be fine.
Yeah, and that's often what ends up happening, and they just create these I think one of the reasons they create such massive worlds is so that they can continue to create new things and not have to plan out ahead. It's a bit of a sloppy way of doing it. It's somewhat interesting, and it's more interesting seeing it in this book form with a more Western mindset, because you're looking at it going, could they not have explained a little bit more about the Nine Cloud Court before we were thrust into it? And then they really don't explain anything about the Nine Cloud Court. They show up, and then they get shoved into the Uncrowned tournament. There's no exploring the city, no understanding the culture. It's just there.
Yeah, the closest we get is a little interludes from the analysis bot in one of the Abaddon's heads.
It'd be fun if there was like a sub-author or like a co-author that has to go back and clean all this up and make it fit. That's Cultivation for you.
That man's gonna lose so many hairs.
He might make it more interesting. Well, and that's, I think, either if you put a lot more detail into this book, because as with Will Wight's other books, it's too short. It was really easy to get through.
Did you think the House of Blades trilogy was too short?
Yes.
Huh. Okay.
Each individual book I could go through in a day.
Okay.
And I did. I think that this book, either you would put a whole bunch more detail to make the Nine Cloud Court more interesting, the Akura clan more exploration, a little bit non-plot relevant, but maybe some emotionally relevant scenes. Or you could take this book and merge it with the next book, which is Wintersteel.
Mm-hmm.
because then you'd have, I think, the whole of the tournament in one book, and that would make it more satisfying. He loves doing these anime ends,
Yes.
Yeah.
ending on that cliffhanger, that wild thing, and the North Strider, who's Dross? Cut.
Next time on Abaddon Z.
I think the baddies in these books so far have been more forces than a particular person, right? There's been enemies that, quote unquote, were evil or bad that Lindon has faced, but the Dread Gods, the Abaddon, at least the portions of the Abaddon that are playing this chess game on a universal kind of level, the Dread Gods that are coming. Apparently, the Dread Gods also have like followers or worshippers or something. So they seem to have more influence or more effect on the world than just this imminent looming threat. And the Sephora character, or whatever her right name is, they seem to stand out as the baddies. But that's two forces, the Dread Gods and the Abaddon. I would claim them as more forces than individual baddies. And then the individual baddie would be the Sephora character so far in this book.
Yeah, at least not yet, because the Monarchs are just kind of jerks. None of them have come out and necessarily said, I am evil and will destroy everything. They're just posturing with each other, and everybody else is caught in the crossfire.
I'm thinking of another anime called Monster. And yeah, so Jonas, I think his name is, right?
Jonas,
or Jonathan, or who's the? It's a J letter. He's the guy who's murdering everybody.
Jaundice?
No,
The Jonas Brothers?
Yeah,
JT, have you watched Monster?
it's
No.
Johan.
Neither have I.
Johan is objectively the evil guy because he's the one who's creating chaos and destruction, and he's actively screwing with the main character, the doctor that saved him as a child.
Yep.
So there's nothing like that here. And for those who haven't watched Monster, get it.
It's one of the best anime of all time.
One of the best. One of my top 10 favorite animes of all time.
It's the GOAT psychological thriller.
Yes, I would agree. It's on Netflix. If you don't have Netflix, it's like $30 to buy the full DVD set on eBay.
It's weird that you know that it's on Netflix as a person who doesn't have Netflix.
Because I tried to find it. I almost bought it when it was on Amazon. I almost bought it because for the whole series, it was like $70. And I was like, I'm going to wait. I waited, and then the licensing rights lapsed. Netflix bought it up, and now you can't find it anywhere except Netflix, which I don't have and don't want to have. Or you can buy the old DVDs on eBay. Anyway, that's not the point. I'm not here to market Monster. There is no single evil bad guy in the Cradle series that I found so far.
To JT's point, it keeps evolving, right? Like originally it was Lindon's family, and then it was the Fox clan, Heaven's Glory School, and his own clan, right? And then it became surviving in the world with the Jai clan, and then it became surviving with the Aurelius family. Like it just keeps evolving, and so we don't actually get the emotional fortitude. That's not the right word.
Satisfaction?
Not the right word. Like the emotional investment of like this
Right.
is the bad guy. I know they're the bad guy because I've seen them do blank, blank, blank. Because it keeps evolving. We don't stay on them long enough. It's the same thing you brought up earlier about emotional beats, where it's like, well, we don't stay on the emotional beat long enough to know that that's the bad guy.
Did you guys talk about the other Akura clan members yet?
Not really.
No.
I remember in the last book that we did, Underlord, we talked about Akura, Harmony, and perhaps the significance of names.
Yeah, I brought that up. The irony and
Yeah.
the significance of names.
In this book, what did you think? Because we were introduced to a couple new characters. The ones we knew were Akura Mercy, Charity, and Harmony and Malice. And in this, we also saw Grace and Pride and Fury.
And then some other ones who didn't have the ironic naming
That's true.
because they were like outer family.
Was there another one as well? I think there was one more that we barely talked about.
I really enjoy Fury. We don't get enough time with him throughout the series. He's almost like, if I was to pick someone in the Akura clan that I really would like to see more of, it's Fury. Similar to how I say the same thing about Zeal. It's just like, he's fun, but we don't get enough time with him.
So you funny enough, like the extremely depressed and extremely optimistic individuals. You've got
yeah.
Eeyore and then Goku.
Yeah.
Because that's sort of what Fury reminds me of, is he's literally just Goku. In one of the outtakes or whatever at the end of the book, he starts charging the Kamehameha. It's like, no, don't do that. We're going to get sued.
Yeah, it's copyrighted. Stop it.
Yeah, the one that stood out to me, and I kind of hated him, was Akura Pride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's this the Joe Pesci apparently of the Akura clan. He's short but fierce and competitive and has an axe to grind and really, really dislikes Lindon.
I liked Pride not as a person, but as a character. He was more interesting than the others. And he's a really odd take on Pride, because if you were to tell me which of the Akura clan members represented Pride, let's say of the younger generation, I would have said Harmony.
Yeah.
Harmony felt way more like a calm, confident Pride than Akura Pride, the actual one, is more of this kind of smoldering hate. Now, is he prideful? Yes.
He just has a constantly wounded pride. Like the universe has done him something wrong in his past, possibly by making him short. Now he's out to make it everyone else's problem.
He should join Raygon Shen. He's got a pride.
I disagree. All right. I think
Of course you would,
he's
short boy.
tall enough, all right? Tall enough for what he needs.
Wait. JT, how tall are you?
Don't ask.
He's a manlet.
A manlet?
What
is a manlet?
If you talk to the internet, anything under 5'11".
Okay, but that's like most men on average.
I know. That's the joke. I'm 5'4", so I am definitely shorter than average.
Oh wow, I'm taller than you. I'm just below 5'6".
I'm not shocked. Most people
without my
are.
hair.
All of my friends are like 6 feet plus too. Doesn't help.
So I'm just gonna assert some dominance. I am 5'10.25".
That just makes you king of the manlets.
That's about my height as well.
Well, yeah, yes.
That's why I call them manlet. We're all manlets.
It's a weird group to be a part of.
Yeah.
Even though I was part of it.
No, so Pride he's an odd pick for that. I don't think he's like dealt a bad hand constantly. I just think that that's his personality.
Yeah.
You said he stands out to you. Like what about him stands out to you?
It's his interaction with his name. It's similar to Harmony, who you can kind of argue, oh, he had some harmony, but really he was this arrogant jerk. Pride is like that in that there's definitely pride in him. He's extremely confident, but the personality trait that I felt that was most interesting in him was this kind of resentment against Lindon and his constant need to push down the guy that wasn't invited there by him. I don't know. It was this kind of hate that was in the back of his mind the whole time, or this apparent hate, versus Akura Grace, who shows up for just a little bit, is described as being pretty much exactly the bog standard of what you would expect somebody named Grace to be, if you're supposed to follow the naming convention. Akura Courage, which is the one I looked it up. He was the guy with the swords, who you see for like 2 scenes because he loses and says nothing.
He gets curb stomped.
You know, that can probably follow. Charity. She's a more interesting character as well, because she is not exactly giving him charity constantly, but she gives some.
Yeah, it's a fun naming convention, no matter how you slice it. I was just curious about the things that stood out to you for Pride himself.
I would think if you were to write a character to epitomize Pride, you would end up either with like a Raygon Shen type character who's just kind of above it all, mocking anybody below him, or you'd end up with somebody super calm and confident like Harmony. Harmony didn't need to kill Lindon when he took Dross from him, so he didn't. He just didn't bother. It's, oh, you're beneath me, so I'm just going to leave you here.
See, that comes off more to me as calm confidence.
Yeah, but that's pride.
He
to
sort
me.
of
That could be pride.
So I think I've spoken about this at least in one past episode. The difference between words, and so it's like, well, what is the difference between pride and confidence? Like, just we don't have to derail on this for 57 minutes, but like, just a quick first thing that comes to mind, like, what is the difference between confidence and pride?
I would say pride is having too much full of yourself. You're not self-focused. It's more that you don't believe anything can stand up to you. Confidence is more like, that thing might kill me, but I'm still going to try. And I will probably beat it.
I would say pride is an overarching character trait, and confidence is situational. I would say confidence is something you have about a situation. Pride is, I'm confident in all situations.
I can get behind that. I think pride is characterized by being boastful, dismissive, or defensive in situations. To use Casey's example is, like, I'm going to go into this thing. I might die, but this is what needs to be done, and I think I have enough to beat this thing. When you're confident, you don't need validation. Prideful people constantly strive for validation, and when they are dismissive or defensive, that's just their insecurities being hidden, or their attempt to hide their insecurities.
Is that the Oxford Dictionary version? Or is
No.
that, it sounded like it at the beginning.
Or when I said 3 words, boastful, dismissive,
Yeah.
Yeah.
what else would you say pride is? Like, if you were going to describe it in...
Yeah, Jonathan, what is yours?
What's your take?
So pride is saying I'm better than you and you'll never live up to me. Confidence is saying I'm pretty great and you can be great too. Ethan would be confident. And pride is always above you and you can never catch up to it. It's always putting others down. So it's kind of like a mixture of your guys' different examples. I do disagree with JT a little bit that confidence is situational. You can be confident in yourself and never have to think about a situation because I would to bring it to the real world, it's this idea that Jung talks about it being integrated with yourself. You know where you stand, both being a manlet and being strong. You're like, hey, I know what I can handle and I know what I can't handle. And then if something that you can't handle shows up, you're like, well, unless you have to deal with it, which is Casey's example, I think I can win. I'm going to go anyway. Kaladin, to quote, because you guys were talking about Wight Kings earlier,
Yep.
is confident. He knows, like, well, I kind of have to do this anyway, but I will do the best, even though he knows that sometimes he can get beaten. That's how I would differentiate the two. His pride says I'm better than you and you'll never live up to me. Confidence says I'm pretty great, but you can be great too.
I think the only thing I would add to that is confidence allows for a person to acknowledge their limitations and maybe seek a way to rise above, where pride, that's where the defensiveness and dismissiveness comes in, where they will boast about how great they are, but never admit any of their limitations, and that's where they often fail and fall.
I also like the thing you said, Slava, about validation, because that's pretty relevant too, I'd say, with pride and versus confidence.
Yeah, I'd like to revise my definition. I think yours is closer to what it truly is.
Who's yours?
You and Slava.
Our collective definition.
Yeah, your kind of agreement
I choose
together.
not to be part of Slava's definition.
Okay, fine.
That's very prideful of you. Dismissive, I would say.
I would say even mine is better than Slava's.
Now, is he just being confident, or?
No, he's just being a jackass.
Challenge me. Let's.
Everyone else is
Penny
fallen to
for a
hubris,
ride.
but not me. I'm built different. I'm better than them, possibly even better than the gods.
Oh. All right. So next up, we can talk themes, or we can talk moments of the plot a little more. What's the council feeling?
I think there's only one more scene that I can really think of that would be interesting to talk about, and that would be the interaction with, what's his name, Prince Nyan, the Black Dragon.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I don't think it's a huge section. I don't think it's a too much into it.
He comes and goes in this story pretty quick. I mentioned that to Slava, that's one of my favorite parts of this, is
Same.
this idea of like seeing another black dragon who has been corrupted, who's also human, and just like goes mad, and then Lindon has to fight him, loses, but not technically. So I like Nyan.
That was one of my favorite fights from a thematic standpoint. because what he is facing is what he would have turned into if he didn't have the path of twin stars purifying him constantly.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, it is a dark reflection of what he could be, but not really in a character sense, but only in a power sense.
The only thing I remember about that scene, it's been a while since I read it, and I've been reading other books, so correct me, guys, if I'm off base. This is where Lindon uses Dross, his predictive abilities, more than anywhere else. Thematically, I guess, it was a pretty cool scene, pretty cool fight scene. But I wasn't, to go back to the emotional comments from earlier in the episode, it wasn't something I attached myself to more than like, oh, this is cool. Good for Lindon using Dross, advancing in his understanding of what Dross can do. And then it was over and I moved on. What are some themes that you guys saw played out in this book?
In particular, we've been actually seeing this all up through, I would say, the multiple books, but this is the one where it really clarified to me just how much, not the monarchs, but the people who are in power over the main characters are dictating what they will do. It's sort of this theme that the characters, even though they have choice necessarily, they don't really have any choice, because we have, first Ethan was basically dictating to Yerin and Lindon how they would, forge their paths. He pushed the Black Flame onto Lindon. He pushed the humanoid Blood Shadow onto Yerin. And then we see the Black Flame Empire sort of saying, okay, you're going to go out and do this now. You're going to become Skysworn. And we've seen each time Lindon, at the end decides to do something on his own. But then he's just roped back into serving the next higher power. It feels to me like there's a theme that strength determines authority, and unless you have the strength, you cannot have the free will for yourself.
Similar to other Cultivation novels, as I've said before in previous podcasts, might makes right in these sorts of universes. The Monarchs make the rules because they're the toughest, minus the Dread Gods. But the Dread Gods don't really talk.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's hard to pin down a baddie, because each new book, each new event in Lindon and Yerin's life, there's somebody above them, whether benevolent or malevolent, whether we understand the intention behind whatever they're doing completely, or when it's obviously an antagonistic attempt to control Lindon and Yerin's life somehow, or some kind of antagonistic response to anything Lindon and Yerin is doing. It's always the next thing. It's always the next guy who's in charge, the next guy who's somehow screwing with Lindon and Yerin.
Right. I would say the Abaddon is the ultimate representation of that, because they come in at the very end of the book and then dictate, oh yeah, we're spicing things up now, and you guys don't have any say in it. To the Monarchs.
Mm-hmm.
The Monarchs are like, crap.
Yeah. When we discussed this, I picked the friendship and companionship and resilience and perseverance themes. We briefly touched on that. Out of the list that we have, Jonathan, was there one that stood out to you above the rest? Or if it's the same one as some of ours, meaning Casey, JT's and mine, was there one that you wanted to expand on from your perspective?
I'd say on this idea of power, where is the line? And this is more of a moral quandary and less about the book, so we don't have to sit on this for too long. But like, where's the line of like, quote unquote, correct use of power versus incorrect? Because at the end of the day, when you're in power, it is impossible to ever make a decision that doesn't have a cost to it, that someone will pay. And the idea that, like, is it the right choice? Because leaders are also fallible. Monarchs, Dread Gods are big bad evils. Abaddon, they can make a decision and it doesn't necessarily end up being the right decision still. So, like, where's the line, or what are the metrics that should be used as a checks balance for people in power to measure? This gets philosophical pretty quickly. A lot of people are probably familiar with the trolley car problem.
Oh boy.
Do you pull, there's a train coming on one side there's one person tied up on the rails, on the other side there's 3 people, do you pull the lever to save the one and kill the 3, or do you let the one die so you can save the 3?
Reversed.
You know,
The trolley problem is reversed. It's pull the lever to save the 3.
It's usually that there's the one person is related to you. So do you
Right.
kill 3 people to save the one that you know, or do you let the person you know die to save the larger number of people?
right. So this is the quandary of like the question of power and leadership. You know, some say that leadership is meant to shape lives, not just outcomes, and not that we need to discuss the trolley problem, because we don't. If we it's not entirely related to the book. But what do you do about that? How do you become a monarch and make sure that you stay within the lines?
Who draws the lines?
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer for that. I'm just posing questions. I'm just throwing them out there.
I would say that, especially in books like these, in cultivation novels themselves, might makes right, period.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing anybody can do about that. There is supposedly some sort of higher will that isn't determined by a person or a force. It's just the heavens, is what it's called.
Mm.
That sort of has this, these things are good, these things are bad, but it's very vague, except in very few circumstances. It relies a lot on basic human decency. Things like don't kill random people for the fun of it. Should be obvious.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
But it has, maybe, oh, well, this person he reached for this cultivation material that was on the ground. He was closer, so he got it before me. Now I'm going to fight him and then kill him to take it. Is more morally gray than you would expect from that kind of a moral system, because there's no higher power. A lot of this comes down to religion, and because this is a book in which the gods are basically the Abaddon, and the Abaddon are not beholden unto sort of an absolute.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the person above you decides
Right.
is essentially what is right, aka might makes right. What the monarch wants, the monarch gets, and if the monarch decides you are expendable, then you are. And that's just the way of things.
Yeah, and if the ultimate goal, to bring it into in-world, the ultimate goal is to defeat the drag gods, and the way you defeat the drag gods, you win this tournament, which sets you up to finally battle the drag gods or battle whoever is in between you and the drag gods. Wherever the next step is, you do what you have to do to win this tournament. And so, to JT's point, might makes right. You pull the lever, you kill your guy if the other 3 can help you win, or you kill the 3 because your guy is the one who's going to help you win.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the end of it.
Is extreme utilitarian ethics.
Yep.
Which is
It is extreme. Yeah.
But it's utilitarian, but not. So a lot of utilitarians would say, "Oh no, you kill the one person to save the 3 because 3 is greater than 1," and that But they're making the deontological point that saving more lives is better. That assumes that you think that, but there are going to be other moral systems that say, well, what if that person is related to me, ergo my genes are carried on through that person, so I should save that person and kill the other ones. Because really all of life is a battle between overarching systems and families and such. And that would be a very cultivation novel thing to say as well.
I'd also say it'd be more of a biological argument from the genes. But anyway.
There's more complexity to it. My obligation to my family member
Correct.
outweighs. It's not
Correct.
about genes or...
It's about emotional bonds.
Even deeper than that. It's not about genes and the ability to carry on those genes, our genes.
Yep.
It's my responsibility to my family, to my immediate friends, companions, and let's say in this hypothetical, it's a daughter or a son or a wife or a brother. My responsibility to my brother is greater than 3 randos tied up on the train tracks.
Right. So what he's saying, to put more simply, is there's no ability to be objective in a situation like this. It's a bad situation no matter how you slice it, and you have to make a decision that's based on your experiences and life, and you can't make an objective decision even if you think that you would, where you're like, okay, I'll kill my family member. That's not necessarily the correct decision because you can't really be utilitarian because then you're causing yourself suffering. It's just like it's purposefully
Yeah.
a difficult problem
Yeah.
to be a difficult problem.
You wouldn't call something a problem if it wasn't difficult.
And the objective part of it comes if the hypothetical was changed and you had the ability to save all of them or just walk away. Objectively, yes, of course, you should save all of them. And if that option presented itself challenges that you were too cowardly or unwilling or apathetic to take on, and you said, hey, you know what, the easy way out is just walk away, all four are dead, and I have nothing to do with this. Then you can bring an objective standard and say, well,
always
no.
a third option. Always a
No,
third option.
the objective truth here is to save life because lives are valuable. No matter if you're a utilitarian or not, you will say that whether you believe it or not. You'll presuppose that. But in this situation, I think you're right, Jonathan. It's just somebody's dying, so there's no good that comes out of it.
If the scenario was stated that, one being has to be, one body could stop the train, at least, something like that, then you have the third option of jumping in front of the train and just letting it kill you and saving 4 people, which would objectively be a greater good. But I've derailed us with a philosophical quandary.
What kind of man-led train are you talking about that stops by hitting one person?
Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood Train.
No, I like this idea of power and how it's reflected in the book, in this whole series, because I think the power ends up being more of a political tool. In Cultivation novels generally, it's looking at a kind of a genre perspective. Power, personal power, or the power of a clan or a sect is just used to either maintain itself or to grow itself. So this is the constant posturing between people in Sacred Valley. It's about their arrogance is about trying to give off that air of higher than you, better than, above the rest, aka come join us and become part of our sect and learn our stuff. And similarly, and then outside of that, all of the Black Flame Empire, become part of that empire, learn something of our techniques and join our families. And then that's just part of the Akura clan and what have you. There's all these political machinations going on in the background, because that's the threat that Charity makes to Lindon in the book, is if you don't want to fight because he tries to get out of being in their team, by the way, it's not just about our pride and you fighting for us. It's about, if you don't, the Black Flame Empire is taken over by the Gold Dragons. And from what I've heard, they aren't great.
Yeah, and this adds more complexity to these sort of conversations, because you could have Lindon, who one could argue he sees power as a tool to protect, right, and grow because of where he came from. For Northstrider and Malice, it's, to JT's point,
Right.
It's defined by larger goals, political ambition, and power must serve the immediate goal of the clan, the survival of their domains, if you will. We see, I think, in real life and in this book, and we'll probably see more of it in 8 through 12, is power without responsibility. I don't want to quote Spider-Man, but power without responsibility, power without checks and balances or something objective, leading you will lead to chaos and harm. Even yourself. You might win the immediate battle, but eventually the abuse of power will lead to your downfall.
I just thought of another theme.
Lay it on us.
Fate and the destruction of it. Because I just had the thought that Lindon leaving Sacred Valley only occurred because of what that one Abaddon did at the very beginning of the book. So with a single marble, she basically started a chain reaction of events that completely disrupted the fate of an entire world. And he is essentially the wrecking ball that just came in, and all of the balance of the powers is now starting to tilt and wobble back and forth because of one action that was taken. It's like the butterfly wings flapping, causing a hurricane in another country. And so how much, I talked about how they have no free will, but in a way, Lindon, out of everyone except maybe Ethan, because he also has some heavenly disruption going on, has the most free will out of any of the characters because his fate is no longer set in stone. They can't divine his fate quite the same as they did before, the heavens.
Where do we know that from? I don't remember that being revealed.
I think it was when the Abaddon, I forget her name, the angel
Serial?
character, Serial, went back. Machiel the Hound basically lambasted her for disrupting the fate of Cradle, and now he's going to have to adjust the balances a bit on his own.
Right.
Which is what activated the Dread Gods early.
Yeah, because Machiel, if I remember correctly, he's sort of opposed to anything that destabilizes this world or its existence, right?
Yeah.
He wants certain outcomes, and he sees himself as the judge and arbiter of maintaining certain events to ensure those outcomes. It's how I remember it. But if I remember correctly, that's what Machiel's whole shtick is. He wants to stabilize the world. He wants to keep it as is. Any deviations he sees as a threat.
He is the de facto leader of the Abaddon, which actually I think is, I might have mentioned this before, that it's probably connected to his name. All of the names of the 7 angels, or I think most of them are connected to actual angels from something called the Book of Enoch, which was a part of the Bible that's not considered canon.
Apocrypha?
Yeah. No, it's not the Apocrypha. I don't think. It's something else.
Is Enoch in the Apocrypha? I don't think it is.
No, I don't think it is.
Okay.
It's sort of, and all it has to do with is these angels and demons and the kind of heavenly fight that's going on between them. But it's got a lot of cultural relevance because people like thinking that way. Michael is one of the 2 angels that are accepted as canon in the Bible.
Named in the Bible, yeah.
Yeah, Michael and Gabriel. And Michael means leader of God. So it's the leader of God's armies. So I think Machiel is supposed to be Michael. Suriel is also actually, I think Sariel is in the Book of Enoch, and it means protector or healer, something like that.
Go down this road a little more. You haven't talked about this before, from what I can recall.
We have, what was his name? The one that they're looking for, the other angel. He's sort of like the angel of death archetype.
The Reaper?
Yeah, Azrael.
Yeah, Azrael.
Yes, who was the fallen
angel of death,
angel,
yeah.
I think. Was he?
No.
Was he fallen?
That's Azazel.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, Azrael is the angel of death. I know that I think about half of them were taken from something almost directly from the Book of Enoch or the Bible, but yeah, they're Machiel the Hound, Gadrael the Titan, Durandiel the Ghost, Telariel the Spider, Razael the Wolf, Suriel the Phoenix, and Zachariel the Fox, and Azrael the Reaper. But Suriel is taken pretty much exactly from the Book of Enoch, and Gadrael, I believe, is really close. And it means, I think Gadrael's the one that means protector. Let me get angel names.
Gabriel?
It's not Gabriel. It's a different one, actually. Oh, and actually, Abaddon, by the way, itself is the name of an angel. Archangel Abaddon, the Lord of the Bottomless Pit.
First day on Bottomless Pit supervisor duty. It's not bottomless.
Bummer.
There's a Gabriel, but there's also a Gadriel from the Book of Enoch. And it means, Gadriel means wall of God, and he is the Titan whose specialty is defense. I think that's pretty clear. But the rest of them, I couldn't necessarily find good
Durandiel
connection.
sounds like Durandal, which I think was one of the swords of the Round Table.
Was it? I didn't know that the other swords that besides Excalibur had names.
Oh yeah, several of them. No, it was actually the sword of Roland, Durandal. The sword of Roland from the Song of Roland. He's one of Charlemagne's knights.
Down the rabbit hole we go.
Down the rabbit hole. All the names probably have references.
So what you're saying is Will didn't make this stuff up, and I've been lied to.
You are correct.
How dare he pull from thousands and thousands of years of history and culture? How dare he?
Listen, he's already robbing the Chinese East. Why wouldn't he rob the Western?
That is the point, right? He's doing a Cultivation novel, which is very Eastern, but he's adding a Western perspective to it. I just thought it was interesting that he chose to use a lot of these, and I'm still wondering why he used names that didn't really connect with anything that I could find. like Telariel the spider, for communication and detection. I don't know where that name kind of originates from. There doesn't appear to be any connection on the wiki that I'm looking at.
Makes sense. But that's cool information that I wasn't aware of.
I want to ask a question about the second part of what all this leads to, is the free will component of it, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Lindon's journey sort of exemplifies free will. And I'll tell you why I think that. Born as an unsold, he's considered to be fated to mediocrity, but we see him now as an underlord. Yerin, she constantly rejects certain aspects of her power, rejects certain norms, rejects certain assertions made about her fate, and she seems to be doing things and making choices. And this goes back to, are you really making choices or not? But I don't want to really go down that road. But both of these characters, Lindon and Yerin, while making these free will choices against the norms, seem to change their fate. Because Lindon's no longer unsold. Yerin is able to control, better-ish, her blood shadow. Mercy decides that she will follow her fate as the representative of her family and the family's power. So you see these three characters interact with fate in some way, but the question here is, how much of it is fate because of what Casey said with the marble and Suriel pulling back time? How much of it is really free will, I guess, is what I'm getting at, kind of roundabout way. What do you guys think, or is that too deep for the SideQuest podcast?
It might be, because you're getting into a discussion that I have constantly with a Baptist friend of mine.
Some really philosophical concepts. I mean, in terms of the story, honestly, there's a game series that I never played called The Legacy of Kain. It was an old PS1 sort of thing, but it had the concept of time travel and all the characters being bound by fate, except in a couple instances where a character wielding the same magic sword against a character from the past wielding the same magic sword. Dueling causes a crash in fate. That's how I see the marble in this instance. Is fate was left up in the air when she rewound time, and by leaving the marble and letting him keep the memories of that instance, she in a way altered the fate, and now is up to him and his free will what he does with it, because he's the only one who remembers.
Well, so Will Wight does appear to acknowledge free will quite heavily in this, with the constructs that the Abaddon use never giving a 100% guaranteed future. They always say, chance of this happening is 99%.
That's fair. Yep.
But, so they're really just extremely good at prediction, and that's all. And if something that they don't know gums up the answer, and that's, I think, something that they point out in, I forget which book, I don't think it's this one, but I think Suriel finds out that Athan has another marble.
Right.
They say, oh, well, he's met another person who's had their fate changed by somebody from the Abaddon or above, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Then that changes everything in the prediction, the calculations.
Yes.
It's pretty heavily, I think, shown. Did she change fate? Absolutely. But I think it's always been the case that the characters in the universe had free will. Actually, never mind. None of them have free will because they're all written by Will Wight.
Okay.
There you go.
There it is.
Well, that kind of brings us to the conclusion of today's episode. Covered quite a bit of ground, mostly because we have a hard out here in the next 10-ish minutes. Always a pleasure to have you guys on, and I can't wait for the next Cradle book for us to do this again, and or possibly other books that you may or may not be reading. Any final thoughts as we wind down?
No, I think we talked enough about our thoughts. It's time for us to meet our fated ends.
Okay. That's, let's see what you did there.
Forgiveness.
I have nothing to say to either of you.
You want to take us out, JT?
Thank you for joining us today, going through our last episode on Volume 7 of the Cradle series, Uncrowned. Remember to share this episode with fellow book lovers in your life, That helps more listeners discover SideQuest Podcast. And join us next time for more adventures. And until then, happy questing. So we can snap back to reality. Oh,
Yes.
there goes gravity.
Yes. Thank you, Eminem.